Hello and welcome back, or welcome to the Pain Podcast with the Pub Scientifique. I'm going to be host today. My name is James, and I have Bart van Buchem with me. Good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to be here again. You can see my background. We have like the disco theme today.
That's it. A bit of celebrations going on in the background.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We're recording this on Halloween as well, aren't we? So
it is. Yeah.
Just to put it in some context. So today we wanted to talk about neuroplasticity in pain recovery. So we've got we got so much to talk about actually, haven't we, when it comes to it? And I'll preface this to begin with, because I did actually have one of my patients this week came to me. He said words, essentially after us discussing things, and I came back to him and said, okay, what's your feeling about what you currently think is going on? And he said, I think it's something to do with plasticity, and maybe I need to work on the plasticity, and it was a really interesting insight actually, and how a word, a sort of scientifically sort of jargony word, has common parlance as well, so that there are people out there who will use it, and they're familiar with this term, and it's something that we can use within and be accurate within our treatments as well. So
totally, yeah, there's a lot. It's a huge topic. So probably we have to sort of see where we go about this.
Paring down. Don't worry, I'll be in charge of time. So,
all right. So we're not going to run over.
Before we get started, if you're listening in here, for those of you who are, you'll know that in the background, we are summarizing all of our podcasts now. We're putting it together into a clinical application format. So for clinicians, it summarizes everything that we go through, gives you a few clinical tips and tools to take away back into your clinic. So check that out. You can find that in the Le Pub free membership, and obviously if you are a premium member as well. So we'll do the same for this.
Awesome.
Now, the word neuroplasticity, what does it really mean? I suppose, let's say, what does it really mean for you, Bart?
Well, neuro refers to neurological, I guess, or the neuro system, or the central nervous system, more particularly. And plasticity is about adaptation and change. So, I think with my broad understanding of what the central nervous system as a system does is adapting and changing over time by whatever is happening in your life, and the ability to constantly doing that. So the constant is change rather than it's trying to have a status quo. What I'd refer in the clinical sense, I would refer to hope and change. Right, so this is basically we're relying on neuroplasticity, or bioplasticity is probably even a wider term, but neuroplasticity refers to the term that our nervous system is not a rigid system; it's constantly changing. That's what I refer, and it makes it recovery. That it's very unlikely you will be in exactly the same place today as you will be in a year or maybe 3 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think change and adaptation, I think, is a good thing. I've got a couple of things that sort of jump into my mind, and I'm thinking about Hebbian learning, and the nerves that wire together nerves that fire together wire together, nerves that fire apart wire apart. Almost got it right. Just coming back into my mind. And I remember having to read Eric Kandel's sort of seminal work on memory and long-term potentiation, and system. It was very nervous system focused because that's what people were exploring. They were looking and biased in that sort of, and then you started to get notions of plasticity relating to cortical plasticity and cortical reorganization. But what you're saying here is that we should consider a much broader scope. So
it's hard to isolate it, right? So how do you know it's just the brain thing? Although I think you can study neuroplasticity in the brain, or on a single cell is probably a better focus for a researcher, because you can't simply focus on neuroplasticity. It's basically a metaphor. And you might focus on the neuroplasticity regarding to astrocytes in the whatever region in the brain due through stressful tasks in mice or rats. So and that's probably one of those little things that gives you an idea of that. It is actually a thing, but it's not the simplicities that's going to tell you what the meaning. I think the overall meaning is like neuroplasticity is probably that change and adaptation, and it's not related to one single region in the brain or in the periphery, or in the brain stem, or even further down. So yeah, but it's also, I think it's important to stress that it would talk it in a broader way, that we are maybe simplifying it because for the clinical relevance. But if we talk about the detail, like the neuroplasticity in terms of what happens in the brain and in the rest of the body, we have to be very cautious about using the term and understanding what context it is. And it's far more complex than we can even imagine how that works.
So I'm just like thinking of a role as a clinician. What we know is if someone exercises, for instance, you'd expect some adaptation of the bone, muscles and ligaments and things like that. So would that still be neuroplasticity, or is that something else then? Or are we starting to group that all in together?
Yeah, that's a great question. What do you think? We can't avoid it. I think probably the most, what I remember from where the field is starting to understand what neuroplasticity was a thing is in stroke or traumatic brain injury. So people losing function and suddenly it gets back. And how does it happen? So I think in the neuro field, it's far more integrated than it in the MSK world. So if it's about back pain or orthopedic rehab, we should consider neuroplasticity as a part, because pain sometimes is a bigger issue than the orthopedic, or just the recovery of the tissues is not as much driven by the notion of neuroplasticity as we have understood it over the time, but it's a key part of it. But when it's getting problematic, and especially when it's so obvious, when there's a stroke or traumatic brain injury, things are starting to be, wow, I can see how we can relate this to a brain function. But like we know nowadays that also MSK rehab requires neuroplasticity, equally important as any other part of the recovery. But again, it could be tricky to pull this apart.
Yeah. I suppose as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking about, if we generalize, does generalizing mean that it starts to lose some of the clarity as well? So, should we focus? So I know Lorimer was a very strong advocate for the idea of bioplasticity, but is there a risk in doing that as well? I got another thought, and it's about adaptation, because one of the words that you've often heard in the past relating to pain is maladaptive plasticity. And I'm wondering, do you think there could ever be anything like maladaptive? Or as what you and I'm hearing, and I'm just repeating back, is change is inevitable. So Whether or not it's bad is neither here nor there. It's just that it is, and it is change.
Yeah. I don't know. So I do know think that mal or bad is not. I don't think that's the right terminology, because we don't have any proof that there is something like maladaptive, if it even exists. What does it look like? Does the cell, if it sprouts in a single area and it doesn't only have like a 50% effectiveness, you could say, well, that might be sort of like a reduction in adaptation by nature or because of a disease. I think I could think about malfunctioning, for example, in multiple sclerosis, regarding to key immune cells in the brain that would allow you to have adaptation, and things like diseases within dementia, for example, also gives that bits and pieces of that. You can see there must be something malfunctioning, but that's quite understood. I'm not sure if that's the case in pain or MSK rehab, or even within brain pathology like stroke or traumatic brain injury. I think the body does the best it can within its capacity, and it may change over, and the variation over individuals and groups, and maybe health in general. Yeah.
Perhaps this is something that, would be great to hear from our listeners as well. What's your thoughts about whether or not maladaptive as a term could be helpful or not? And as you're talking about it, I'm just thinking of all the times that I've come across, I've heard or read about things that are maladaptive beliefs, maladaptive plasticity, etc. And there's a lot of blame that potentially can go on someone based on you saying there is a maladaptive process. So, yeah.
Yeah, that many even central sensitization in terms of a maladaptive process, not necessarily whether it could occur over time by long-term potentiation, that the connectivities change and sort of reorganizing the structure and the functions and the connections. But then when the inflammatory source suddenly disappears, then it also should be able to recover. And if that turns out not to be possible, or that it doesn't change back to its original set point, that's what is sometimes called maladaptive. But I'm not sure if that is maladaptive, or is it just adaptive? It's just changing. But I think it's quite, because in the clinical sense, it also puts you in a position that I'm broke. I'm something is damaged in my body, or it's sort of trying to move away from that. But maybe it's true. Sometimes I'm pretty okay to say if a person has experienced years and years of chronic pain after an injury, that you can say, well, something went wrong, or something did not something in your favor. It didn't help you out. So I would be uncomfortable to say that it's normal. It may not be pathology-wise, but I would be uncomfortable to say, I would be quite uncomfortable to say it's normal and just the body did the best thing, but it probably didn't brought you back to a set point where you can live your life. And maybe you can, but whilst I'm saying that, I'm thinking, well, I'm not 100% sure about this. I might change my mind over time, but in a clinical encounter, you would be also have to validate that. You have to acknowledge something is different.
Yeah. As you're saying that as well, I'm just like, for some reason I've got Laura mode, like just rolling around in the back of my head. I believe, but I'm this. I hope I'm not misquoting him, but I believe he used to say something like, neuroimmune system got you into this place, and your neuroimmune system will get you out of this place, or words to that effect. Am I being accurate? Is that Laura?
Yeah. Plasticity got you into the problem, and it also going to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
Which is,
go on. Which is what?
Which is probably a safe place to say, because it doesn't assuming that it's right or wrong. It's changing. It doesn't. And what is recovery, right? What does it mean?
Yeah.
Doesn't need even define. So, but I think it refers to change even. And I believe that probably the same system is responsible for the change in the first place in a negative way. It might also the same system is responsible for that it turns out positively, but it's very vague, right? It's quite safe language. Otherwise, you can say, well, probably that's not necessarily. But even then, saying what system?
Yeah. So that's a sort of nice segue onto the next point, I guess, which is the need for change. So I'm interested in that as well, to what will promote change. So if you want stuck, you talked about someone having pain for a long period of time. It's almost like there's a learned, like, this is who I am, this is how I am, and my system is sort of comfortable being in this state, as it were. So it sounds like promoting some sort of need is necessary in order for you to move out of or into an alternate state as well. So where can we, let's think sort of practically, if that is the case, then what are the sorts of tools that allow us to do that then?
Basically everything that is creating.
And there ends the
context.
podcast.
Yeah. Well, I think everything that could contextualizing this, everything that could change the experience potentially, that is not limited to one source for sure. So I think everything that we can experience, not necessarily conscious, also unconsciously, referring to a person who has disabling headaches for a long time and then goes for a holiday or something significant happens and they realize that they're not in the same space or headaches anymore, that probably that, and what is it in that holiday or that significant experience or activity that makes that the experience like that, and because the pain is different, at least, which is quite interesting, because it's not because it's less humid or the temperature. It's not just the sound. It's not just the tastes of the food. It's not the people where you with alone, but probably everything together that creates a whole new experience that allows your body to have a different experience yourself. So a different perspective or a different perception of the body, which also relates to other things. That can you change your, and I think we're moving into perception right now, because I do think that's quite important, because what you can change is how can you change the perception through exercise, environment, social interaction, safety or unsafety, cognitive and emotional states, psychedelics, meditation, all states of mind are, in my view, that could change the perception, even if it's only for a short amount. And I think from a therapeutic point of view, so that when does it become therapy? I think if you consistently going to focus on that, constructing that state and making the system more sensitive for that change, so it's more likely to adapt in that direction. So instead of being stuck, having an experience of a different embodied experience about their body in itself, or on the experience of headache, then it's actually my head felt light and I haven't experienced that for a while. I thought I was stuck, and now I can see it's changing through the meditation, through the exercise, through the manual therapy you do, anything that requires that. So probably it has to be significant enough, or it has to be strong enough to provoke that change. And as a therapist, I think you can manage that, and you can start using it as a administer these experiences and these perceptions more consistently.
So what I'm hearing is we could use any possible tools available, but what we're aiming to do is create a bit of something that's different. And does difference need to be challenging? Does difference need to be something that someone is aware of or conscious of? Like is that
necessarily? Yeah. Well, sometimes it just happens, right? We don't have to worry about. When you're on a holiday, you're not worried about all the details. You just feel good, or it just feels different. That's it.
Yeah.
And then we tend to blame if we're seeking for if we're seeking for a reason for what is this in this experience, then it's actually become quite tricky, because we tend to blame or think that it's just one thing, but it's so much in it that creates that sense, I guess. Although, yeah, I don't necessarily think it has to be conscious, although it might be helpful to understand what it is, so you can navigate and facilitate this change if it's required. But it's not about doing more or less or harder or softer. It's so much. I think it's more subtle. Probably it's not about a volume necessarily.
Okay, and then I'd sort of I want to flip the coin here and just go, from our conversation, I'm sort of rounding towards pain in a way becoming like status quo. That in a way, life, your systems, etc., exist in a sort of common state, if you want. And what I'm hearing from you is that what we need to do, if that is the case, is to offer conditions of something being different. And then how different might be a part of some of the thinking with the therapy. So, how different does it need to be? Could different be too much? Could it be too challenging? But could it be too little and not challenging enough? And therefore,
Yeah.
the ability to collaborative be able to create a condition that means that change is favorable or adaptation is necessary. I'm wondering, so just therapeutically, like, can we think about how we might do that practically then with our patients? If I'm right in summarizing.
Yeah, but it's probably quite relevant, right? So what is the right dose? What do you need to change in order to make a relevant change? Even if it's not more or less, I think, and there should be, if change is happening, we assuming that something is happening in the brain, but if it's only temporarily, it's only in this state, probably that's a good start. But then you're trying, or I guess that we should think about how and if it's possible. I think there's a condition where you can say, well, it's only possible in the clinic with you in this very specific condition. So that's probably this is a unique experience that it makes it feel different. If it doesn't happen in any other condition or in any other situation, it's probably hard to transfer or figuring out ways of doing. Could be quite frustrating in a way. But I totally agree with you just saying. It's probably what we need to address it, but it's not necessarily the goal. The goal is that change occurs, and that people, their experience is changing in any way that makes it more tolerable, or even getting rid of the idea that it's stuck, that it's not changing. It's actually, it is changing, and that people can find strategies to improve their let's say their active coping strategy. So let's figure it out instead of let's leave it there and don't pay any attention on it. I think it could be quite interesting to activate and see how you can start exploring it instead of leaving it and don't touch it and not even try not to think about it. So it remembers me. You probably remember Gian Domenico Iannetti, and Moreau's work of the Salience network. It always sort of gave me the idea, like, well, it needs that reward processing systems that were involved in change, how the brain sort of activates new networks, and pretty cool how they sort of worked out. That, and what it kept me, the idea that struck me, that it has to be significant. It needs, in order to take change, it has to be a volume of, it has to be sort of one rewarding, and it has to be significant. Otherwise it's nonsense. It's not really going to change. So if therapy is creating a condition that is basically just confirming the status quo, it's probably shit. You're basically reaffirming the status quo. Therapy is an opportunity where you can seek for the difference, at least, or the change, which makes it exploring it more, and hopefully enough to find some new experiences. And whether it's manual therapy, meditation, exercise therapy, emotion regulation, whatever.
Yeah. You're looking for chances to make things a bit different. Yeah. And with the Saliency network, I mean, the obvious one that links with that is valence as well, isn't it? Is the emotional tone with this. So
Totally.
it's intimately linked for many people with their experience of pain, isn't it? And
it is.
being able to shift that. I've kind of like, then it's starting to make me think about what recovery is. And you said that a few minutes ago, didn't you, about, what is it? What is recovery? And so many people come to me, I'm guessing this must be the same for you. And initially they just want to get rid of pain. So when you're saying, what do you want to get from our work together? It's like, I just want pain to go. I just want to be rid of it. Or I just want to be my old self again, or something like that. But well, one thing, plasticity is ongoing. It's an ongoing process. You will never be that person you were 5-10 years ago, because you simply are a different person, a different system. But recovery, from what we were saying, recovery comes in lots of different flavors, doesn't it? And we see that in our patients, where recovery might be opening up the ability to engage with their family, friends, or experience emotion in ways that perhaps they weren't before, or be able to concentrate at work. Yet pain might be part of those experiences.
Absolutely, yeah. It may change over time, right? When from the first encounter, the person is focusing, well, if the pain is gone, I'll be all right, I'll be fine. And during the sessions, they started exploring and found out there are many ways of recovery. There are many aspects of being a new person, or like feeling different, at least, and that could be very helpful. Sometimes you can't say it's not, and that this is a very common conception of recovery in many research papers and randomized clinical trials, where you can see there are typically large effect sizes on participation, quality of life, and rather small effect sizes on pain changes in pain. And it doesn't correlate necessarily. So you can see people have limited effect sizes on the pain, but huge effect sizes on quality of life. So what's happening there? And that doesn't happen in the first encounter. That happens over time, and people just hang in. And I can tell you that's it's a great thing. You can't blame it. It's not a bad thing if pain is not changing, but quality of life is improving massively. And it's an interesting conversation to have with your patient if they have this experience. So what is it that you make? So and for them it's even hard to explain. So I don't know. It just feels different. So and it feels more tolerable. It feels more in control. I'm more in touch with my body. I don't feel stressed out about it. I'm don't feel the depression around this. I just feel more energized. But it's still there, which is fun. It's quite amazing. So I do think pain changes, but probably the VAS, so like the visual analog scale or the numeric rating skills, are not telling you what pain is and what it really makes it change.
Yeah, the full experience of it. Yeah.
It is that.
I'm afraid we're running out of time here. So shall we do a little bit of summarizing and
the recap?
Yeah, see whether we can do a good job of that. So, I mean, first of all, we took what I've found actually to be quite an amazingly challenging concept, which was neuroplasticity in pain recovery. And what we tried to do, first of all, is, I suppose, historically, we placed neuroplasticity in terms of learning and cortical reorganization, and adaptability was something that sort of came out, wasn't it? And whether or not there was anything like maladaptive processes, or whether it was part of a adaptive system, and plasticity, and even, how we could transfer blame based on our assumptions of what's going on in that person's systems as well. We started to come out as well, didn't we? We came out and said, why concentrate solely on the nervous system, although we obviously might want to measure that in research. The way that a nerve communicates with another nerve, and cells with other cells, but perhaps it would be better and fuller if we came out and we looked at multiple systems interacting with each other, and then the person in their world as well, which I suppose led us a bit on to the practical applications of creating some sort of adaptation and change, and something that I suppose, and I'm a bit biased here, but I suppose we talked about is around creating difference. So the status quo versus something different, and kind of think about the path less traveled here. So, if someone stays in status quo, then it's very little motivation for their system to change. And we were talking about how we create some difference and challenge, and what that might look like. And you came up with many different, it could be talking therapies, manual therapies, exercise therapies. It could be in terms of relational therapies. It could be any number of areas where you're looking to create some sort of difference, and difference needs to be enough to stimulate the need to undergo these adaptations and plasticities. I think then we started talking about, I suppose we were thinking of philosophically how that applies to us and our patients in terms of pain recovery, the fact that we feel that change adaptation is inevitable, and perhaps we can offer some sense of hope as well for people, given that is an inevitability within them. The phrase impermanence comes up here for me, it's popping into my mind as we're doing that. And the last thing I've just written down here is ships are safest in the harbour, but that's not what they're designed to be. Which,
wow,
as you were talking about it, was just like, I was grabbing there. I was like, I wonder how we do. Has that summarized things for you? How are you doing with that?
Yeah. I'm pretty happy with that. It's a nice summary of that. And we haven't even touched on the terminology that's often used in, let's say, current concepts of treatment, like rewiring the brain and stuff like read this and redo that. It's quite interesting. We haven't touched on that, but I think it sort of be quite interesting to hear from our listeners what they think about these concepts of rewiring in the context of what we have just discussed, because I think there are pros and cons on that, and academically probably a lot of concerns, but from a clinical point of view, there are probably reasons to see if we can just it's been conceptualized as a metaphor, but probably there's a lot in it, and I will be quite interesting to hear from you guys.
Yeah, totally.
How you go about that.
No, I'm as you're saying that, I'm also thinking that there are some quite cool popular science books out there that people will have come across, like Norman Doidge's Brain That Changes Itself.
Exactly.
And then there's some pretty hardcore science relating to learning and memory and stress biology. Things like people like Bruce McEwen and Eric Kandel and the Paul Baccarite you were mentioning about neuroplasticity and stroke. And so, like, there's some phenomenal body of work out there that we could.
Oh, there's so much. Yeah, it will be a shame if to misinterpret it. Those and not quoting these figures being really important to the better understanding of this, and don't screw it by saying it's just a simple thing and we just gonna fix it. It's ridges, and that's why you need to understand these concepts quite well in order to put it in a therapeutic framework.
Totally. Well, thanks everybody for joining us.
Lovely.
Like what you hear, please share. We'd love to hear your experiences as well, and perhaps where your musings and conversations went as well. So it was brilliant chat, Bart. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
And
cool.
Wish everyone
Lovely.
the best.
See you next time. Bye-bye.